Once again, thank you for coming. Thank you. If you've ever heard the term flying saucer to describe UFOs, it's from my grandfather Kenneth Arnold's historic sighting of UFOs that he reported on June 24th, 1947. My grandfather was the first credible witness to report flying saucers of the modern UFO era. Since I'm his granddaughter, I grew up with a very open mind and access to my grandfather's files he acquired in his lifetime. I'm going to tell you about how his sighting changed the world, that helped to create the new science of ufology. I'm hoping you all listen with open minds. On June 24, 1947, my grandfather Kenneth Arnold was flying his Call Air airplane leaving Chehalis, Washington for a business trip. He wanted to fly around Mount Rainier to search for a military C-46 airplane that had crashed on the side of Mount Rainier, that there was a $5,000 reward I found. It was about 3 p.m. and he was getting bright reflected flashes on his cockpit. It was as bright as an arc light. It was something transcendent. He looked around and spotted 9 flying objects flying in echelon formation, traveling at a high rate of speed. They had no tails like an airplane. They also changed formation. He clocked them at 1,700 miles per hour using Mount Adams and Mount Rainier as points. The sighting lasted for about 3 minutes and they disappeared in Mount Adams. He didn't understand the crafts he saw, thinking there was something from a foreign government. He landed in Yakima, Washington and reported what he saw. Then by the time he landed in Pendleton, Oregon, reporters were waiting for him. He described them like saucers if you could skip them across the water. Then the name flying saucers was coined. My grandfather was famous overnight. He got letters, pictures, and all sorts of correspondence from people all over the world that had similar experiences. A group of religious people sent him a letter saying that he was the prophet of the end of the world. My favorite and most mysterious archive is the letter that the Olympian Society notarized by their president, Everett H. Lee. He talks about the flying saucers and their ultimate destiny. A man named Ray Palmer contacted him to have his alternative magazine fate. Later together they write the book, The Coming of the Saucers. Ray Palmer paid my grandfather $200 to investigate what happened to Harold Bell and Fred Christensen, claiming the flying saucers had fallen out of the sky in Maury Island. My grandfather couldn't find a hotel anywhere in Tacoma when he got there, except for the Winthrop Hotel. Mysteriously, there was a reservation in his name. The 2 military officers that met there were the same military officers that went through my grandfather's mail. Lieutenant Brown and Captain Davison took out letters from church leaders saying that he was going to become a religious figure. Then that he was also the prophet of the end of the world. After the plane crashed on the way to Hamilton Air Force Base with the UFO pieces in it from Maury Island, my grandfather was so scared trying to fly home, he almost crashed. His fuel line was shut off. He carefully landed his plane and survived. My grandfather adored his wife, my grandmother Doris. They had 4 beautiful children together, 4 daughters. He ran for lieutenant governor in 1962. On the campaign trail, he painted his airplane. He also met President Eisenhower. I was only 7 years old when my grandfather passed away on January 16, 1984. These pictures are him of my last birthday with him, and also of my dad and my grandfather with his saucers hat on his very last birthday. My grandfather was a guest speaker at the 1977 International UFO Congress in Chicago, Illinois, the year I was born. There he met Stan Freeman. Stan is the last person that I knew in ufology that met my grandfather. Stanton recently passed away, and I had the pleasure of meeting him in 2014. My grandfather's sighting changed the world. In modern ufology, it was a word of new science. He had more sightings of flying saucers in his life as a pilot. My grandfather told me before he died to always think for myself and not to trust the government. I've always been proud of my grandfather and loved him very much. In the 2nd grade, I told my teacher that he was the first to report flying saucers, and at the time it still wasn't right. People didn't believe in flying saucers in 1982. Towards the end of his life, he believed that the flying saucers were the link between the living and the dead. I hope this speech is posthumous of his life after his death. My grandfather should have been awarded for his historical sighting. Thank you. But like I guess I'll do some questions if anybody's got any questions that I can answer. Yeah, what do you want?
So your grandfather believed that there's some connection between aliens and the dead. Did you have any experiences around the time of your grandfather's passing?
Balls of light after people pass in my family seem to appear. And like after his sighting, he was only 29 years old when he had his sighting of the flying saucers. And after his sighting, there's a ball of light that appeared in his house, and it scared him so bad he said the Lord's Prayer, and it finally went away. And also when his grandmother died, everyone in the room saw a ball of light leave her body. In my house personally, I have lots of balls of light. I don't understand why, but they show up on my camera. But balls of light, definitely, there's something about them. And he believed that they're linked between the living and the dead because they were just so extraordinary that the government couldn't explain them. They flew too fast. He had 8 sightings in his lifetime, and he just, that was the conclusion he had. He was a big believer in the Waspy Bible. A lot of people don't remember that Bible. It was a Bible that was popular in the early 1900s, and it was written by a dentist who was a medium. And just one of the quotes is like, who could have created unbeliever so great as God, or something like that. I don't know. Anyhow, some quote from that book, he was always standing behind, like, everybody didn't believe him, and he felt like he was just the poor, unfortunate goat that had this sighting because he got famous so fast, and it really took his privacy away. The postmaster knew exactly where he lived, and so when he got letters from all over the world, the postman in Boise knew exactly his address. They would just put UFO Man in Idaho, and the mailman knew exactly where he lived. So he was quite famous, and his room was being tapped when he was in Tacoma at the Maury Island incident. The room was being tapped. There was a dictaphone. The government they were afraid he was going to become a religious figure, and you can't control a Joan of Arc, so they were pretty scared of him. And he was going to have speeches at the Fork nightclub, and I have the only brochure left in our family with me to share. But his buddy that worked for the Air Guard shut down his speeches because the military didn't want him talking. And they used his friend David Johnson, who was the aviation editor of the Idaho Statesman, to take my grandfather out in the desert. And he warned him. He said, walk 50 feet away from your vehicle. It's being bugged. That the government eliminates their own men. You can't continue talking about the flying saucers. And so he was so scared that he stopped doing speeches. And the only speech he did, though, was in Ontario, Oregon, and that says, the flyer that I have, and it's all laminated because it's very old. But they made it a crime to talk about flying saucers back when he discovered them. It definitely seemed like a crime. And he was believable because he was a pilot, but I've heard 1947 was the summer of saucers. For some reason, it baffles ufologists to this day. Everyone started seeing flying saucers after my grandfather saw them. And it's just so odd because, why? They've always been here. Why did we forget about them? Why all of a sudden, they're back and, we're able to see them. And I've been told our DNA had to be a certain way to recognize them, or, I don't know, just all sorts of theories. But the ufologists, it just baffles them about 1947. And so people were calling in and saying they're seeing them, and they're being told they're crazy because my friend's grandmother was one of them. And she lived in California, and she'd calling UFOs all the time in California, and they'd just laugh it off. So, luckily, my grandfather was respectable enough because he was a pilot. You're supposed to report what you see. And he thought they were, foreign government, guided missiles from the USSR. I think it was the USSR back then, but there was, still kind of a Cold War, I guess, going on. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that war hadn't been ended with the atom bombs. And, also I have a Robert Oppenheimer connection. My grandfather's friend, George Smith, he's passed away now, but he used to record atom bombs going off, and he'd time them, and they'd always end on this weird number, and my mom hasn't explained it to me yet. But he knew Robert Oppenheimer because he was recording these atom bombs going off down in the deserts. And Robert Oppenheimer gave him a penny. It's from 1843. When I was 14, George and my mom took me out to lunch, and George said, Robert Oppenheimer is? I'm like, no. And he's like, here's a penny, hold it. And I held it, and he's like, someday you'll remember this. And And then, years later, this Robert Oppenheimer movie came out, and, a lot of people are learning the history of the atomic bombs, but they've always been here because, in previous, Vedic tests, Indian texts, they talk about stuff like atom bombs going off, so it's a rediscovered, knowledge, I'm sure of that. But, and then the flying saucers always appear too, it seems to be near where the UFO testing sites were. But, I think it's energy and things, and I've actually held a Robert Oppenheimer, token, and one time I was anointed at this church in Portland, and I was surrounded by white light, and I had this vision of atom bombs being a divine plan because souls get stuck here, but if an atom bomb goes off, everybody gets sent back to the creator really fast, to the source. So it's a divine plan, even though it's scary as hell because nobody wants to die in an atom bomb, but I believe we're reincarnated souls, we keep getting reincarnated over and over again. My grandparents definitely believe that. We definitely believe in reincarnation. The Waspy Bible definitely, is a reincarnation book as well. But I'm very curious about it. It's just a book that was kind of forgotten, but you can order one off Amazon. It's beautiful. It comes and it has gold leafed pages. It's $40. But the Waspy Bible is really interesting. But yeah, I just discovered it, and I have my grandfather's Waspy Bible, and he underlined a bunch of things. I didn't bring that to share because I'm just so afraid somebody's going to run off with it. But I'm inheriting my grandfather's estate, and there's just a lot of things that I want to share, and I always donate to the Lewis County Museum. And I was going to donate to Jason. If Jason's around, is he around? Oh gosh, he's not around. My grandfather was part of the UFO Congress in 1977, and he autographed this book, and I was going to give it to Jason for the museum.
Are there any other questions for Shanelle? Yeah, in the back on the right.
How long did his flying career last?
Well, there was one time he got caught in a hurricane, almost died. He had to get stitches in his forehead like this. It ripped his skull open, and so he was very lucky. And he flew until his eyesight, I think, was going, and he sold his 2 airplanes to build the house that my mom inherited. And he stopped flying after he was just getting older. And then he died of colon cancer, and he had a uranium mine. And in my book, you'll see him holding a piece of uranium. And he ended up dying of colon cancer, go figure. But he thought he was going to get rich off uranium, and he had a uranium mine, and and the mine collapsed, so he kind of gave up on the project. But he was a very successful man, but the government were just they were always trying to silence him because they felt like if they could silence my grandfather, everyone else, they could silence everyone, So.
There was one more question, and then I think we'll reserve the rest for the panel tonight at 5 o'clock. And we'll bring up Jonathan Dover next. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Eisenhower reportedly had an emergency dental issue and was pulled away and was gone for a day. And the story goes that he was able to meet some ETs and be read in on certain things. I'm curious when your grandpa met him if there was any other than, hey, how you doing?
Well, no, it was my grandfather's friend George Smith, and I just know that there's something about the time the atom bombs, they always end on the same amount of time to complete. And there's something weird about it, like synchronicity, like how you say angel numbers or something like that. My mom really hasn't explained it to me yet. And unfortunately, just I wish I could ask more questions to George, but he passed away. But I do have the penny, and I could take it to Antiques Roadshow, but I have nothing proving that it was actually Robert Oppenheimer's except for family story. But it's from 1843. It's definitely an old penny, and it was just given as a token to George Smith from Robert Oppenheimer. But he was a Jew rescued from the Holocaust and built the atom bomb for us, and we used it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and just horrible, I hope those souls have been reincarnated by now.
Well, let's thank Shanelle if you have any other questions.